Well, Tim, thanks for being the inaugural the guinea pig on this one here.
Definitely. Glad to be here.
Yeah, this is cool. Well, what I want to do is I want to learn more and have a dialogue with franchise owners, learn their stories. I feel like I know your story. But at the end of the day, I probably don't know all of it. I probably don't know much of it. And so, I want to dive into that. I want to get into your philosophies, how you approach the business. And really at the end of the day, what this is about, or what I hope it's about, is I want to build up a library of content where a prospective franchise owner can come in and review some of these videos and get a good look into what it's like to be a franchise owner, what you've learned over the years, what you would do differently if you could go back and start over. And like
Right.
there's a dynamic conversation there. And as you know, and I believe our job is to prepare a prospective franchise owner as best we can when they're making the decision on whether this is right for them or not. Because when we get people in who are have misaligned expectations around what this is going to be like, it's a hot mess, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
so let's just start. Let's start. So give me the 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 background, and we don't have any time requirement on this, right? Like we can go for as long as we want. I'm not like, it's not like a podcast where we got to be done in 18 minutes. And so what's the Tim Hoffman story, from as early as you want to start up until you made the decision to get involved with BIGGBY? And I
Yeah,
might interject from time to time.
yeah. Interject, ask questions,
All
whatever.
right. All
Right?
right.
Tim Hoffman's story. I I feel like I was always inclined towards business. Like one of those probably weird people who actually like dreamed about business or dreamed about having a cool office or whatever those types of things were. Um,
Did you have people in your life, mentors that were in business?
I didn't.
Really?
I did not.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so even from a young age, I think it was 12 years old, and I got my first paper route. And that's back in the day when, I mean, the Grand Rapids Press thought it was this amazing thing that they would sell you newspapers and you could be an entrepreneur. And so you like literally they dump a bunch of newspapers there and send a bill, and it's my job to go collect from all the homes, and the more homes you collected for them, the more money you made, type of thing. So it was this thing of learning even from an early age. And then for me, I ended up meeting a guy in high school who sold computers out of his basement. And I was interested in computers. My parents were trying to get me interested in computers. And there was this opportunity to like start doing some work on the weekends for him. And he talked me into like hauling these computers home and selling them out of the classified ads on the weekends. So my parents were good enough with it to let all these strangers show up at the house and walk them into the basement. There were some 16-year-old kids selling a computer out of his basement. So yeah, lots of entrepreneurial stuff from an early age.
Did you how long did you have the paper out?
Paper out, I would say I probably had for 6 years. Computers I was selling out of the basement for 2, 3 years.
Did you make some dough?
I did. I
Were
made
you
some.
able, were you able to save, or did you just spend it all?
I was a saver.
Nice.
So I actually ended up, my parents were a little surprised. I graduated high school. Like I bought a house. So I'm moving out and I bought a house
You bought a house right out of high school?
right out of high school. I was like 19 years old.
Wow, that's impressive. That's impressive. And your parents were quite supportive.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, that's big. Did you have friends involved, or was it just you alone doing it?
It was pretty much just me alone. I feel like I had entrepreneurial style friends. Um, we were all trying to figure out ways to make money and those types of things. So that part of it was pretty cool.
Have you stayed in touch with any of them, or did any of them go on to become an entrepreneur like you and have your success and so on?
We've stayed in touch. Some everyone kind of went into their own fields, not as much owning a business, more computer programming or small business type of stuff. Lots of friends with that small business style experience.
Yeah, yeah, it's cool. Okay, so you bought a house in 19. I didn't know that. I didn't know the computer sales piece. I think you mentioned at one point about the paper route. I think we talked about that at one time. All right, so then you're 19 and you head into the world, you bought a house. What happens next?
Yeah, so at that point, I'm working full time for the guy I had met in high school, helping him grow his computer business. So we grew it from selling computers out of the classified ads into a significantly larger operation, buying used and off-lease computer equipment and selling that on an international basis. So we would sell to resellers. We'd bring it in, we'd fix it up, we'd sell it off a skid at a time, and grew that into a good business. And it was definitely fun. I did that for about 10 years.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
for about 10 years.
All right.
And then I decided I wanted to do more of my own business.
How did that transition go? Like you were you were gonna leave, or you were thinking about leaving, and so how did that all go? I assume the guy was a mentor, you were pretty close to him, you worked with him for 10 years. That's a long time.
It was a hard transition. It really was going from kind of more of a guaranteed paycheck, going to what does it look like to be self-employed. I had built up some rental properties at this point, and my wife and I, like, the thing with deciding that you want to have a business is now you have to have an idea. You have to know what it is you want to do. You want to know how you're going to make money. And so start looking around. And I realized I wasn't necessarily the type of guy that wanted to, like, I wasn't going to create a concept from scratch. I didn't have the latest, greatest invention or anything along those lines. So talking to business people, that's when we started looking at the franchising concepts and looking at the ability to buy into something that you can add your own flair to and make better.
Yeah.
So we started putting this plan together. We had some rental properties. We looked at this concept that had done well over time, fitness industry concept. We were going to buy some existing locations that we'd be able to run to have cash flow. And then we were going to start up this newer concept around town called BIGGBY Coffee. And that was our plan put together, and turn in the resignations, decide that I'm leaving the other job. Definitely hard situations, but we're ready to strike off on our own.
Yeah. Well, you got to go back then and talk about owning a frat house. That is a colorful piece of any. I mean, owning a frat house to me is like batshit crazy. So how did you get into that? How did it go? What was it like? What were the upsides? What were the downsides? Talk to me about owning the frat house.
Yeah, so owning real estate made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And that is where I partnered up with a couple of friends. We bought a couple of duplexes, a couple of single family, like life's somewhat okay owning rental property. It has its pros and cons. To me, residential real estate is a little hard, right? You're dealing with where someone lives. There's the calls about, the plumbing or the heating or those types of things. But it's going along. And then I get this opportunity to buy 24 units of frat housing. And I'm looking at numbers on paper, and it looks like it's going to be this like most incredible thing ever.
Right.
And the numbers on paper looked great, and we pulled it off. We closed on the property. This was a friend and I. We went in mutual investment. Not
50,
anyone who's ever been involved in the coffee side, a friend outside of the coffee side. And we close on it, and we go to collect rent the next day. And we realized that it was two fraternities that we had leases from. The one fraternity, like everything seemed somewhat okay. The other fraternity, we walk in to collect rent, and they're like, we don't even have a lease. That's not what we pay. Come to find out, the seller had basically manufactured this lease and it didn't even exist. And so, some long story short, we end up having to evict 50% of our tenants, one of the entire buildings. That building almost burns to the ground. After they move out, some homeless guy like tried cooking in it or whatever. So now, thankfully, we have insurance and everything, but now we're working on rebuilding this building. The one side's going well, but we have no income coming in from this other side. And get everything renovated, find a new fraternity, get everyone moved in. And that was probably about the easiest part of owning frat houses. I'll never forget situations of like showing up to the frat house and like walking in and just being like, you know what? Walk outside, find a homeless guy like 5-10 feet away. I'm gonna let you in. Take as many beer cans as you want. Here's some garbage bags. I'll just let you help clean up. They
there,
definitely knew how to party.
yeah, I think yes. All right, so part of that story, talk to me about you formed a partnership with a friend. What was it, 50-50?
It was a 50-50.
Talk to me about that. Talk to me about what your thinking was, how you set it up, some of the things that you did, maybe some things that you would change about how you set that up. Yeah, let's talk about setting up partnerships, with people.
Right. That partnership went really well. Being 50-50 is a very interesting place to be, because like you can arm wrestle the crap out of it, but there's only so many ways to actually come to a decision. And in that situation, the partner I had got uncomfortable way before I did on the frat houses and asked to be bought out. And like our resolution worked really well. I ended up keeping the frat houses because I thought those were cool. He ended up taking all of our other residential real estate and everything, and we were able to kind of to come up with our exit strategy. But it was my partner at the first coffee shop who really pushed in on me, and like he was even willing to take 49%, which is how that ended up. But that concept that someone really does have to be able to make the ultimate decision. And so going forward, I really have not, and I've done lots of partnerships in my life. I really do enjoy partnerships. I still have partnerships on property to this day. residential, commercial, like different sets of partnerships. But I've never, even though I have two of them right now, I've never really gone back into the 50-50. So it can go both ways. It has its pros and cons. And I definitely lean more towards having someone who's going to take that ultimate responsibility, someone who's going to have that ultimate say at the end of the day.
Yeah, and when you form them, I mean, what I'm hearing, and clarify this, but you're not necessarily saying it's got to be you, but it's got to be
No,
somebody.
it's got to be
It's some,
someone.
okay, yeah, yeah, that's fair. That, yeah, and you know my situation. I mean, I've been 50-50 forever, and you know, that is it does have its pros, and in theory it has pros and cons. You know, in practice, it well, I was going to ask you. So when you bought out your partner and you said you put the exit together, was that predetermined, or did you have to sort of negotiate that in the moment?
We had to negotiate that one in the moment. We had enough assets that we were willing to like divide them between us. So we each got to walk away with 100% of certain assets. I've definitely learned though, like probably some of the best advice is the predetermined exit strategy. Not necessarily that this asset is going to be worth $1 million on this date, but we know how we're going to determine what its value is. We know what the buyout's going to look like. Because then you know what's in each of your heads or all of your heads. You know what's going to be fair. You know what the rules of the game are, and you don't have to spend time stressing about what that's going to end up looking like.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you launch into the fitness franchise arena. You launch into BIGGBY. That is, I have to believe that for somebody that has been kind of cutting their own teeth for, well, since you were 12, essentially, that there were some adjustments for you in terms of being part of a system and so on. Did you struggle with that? Because I never really saw you struggle with that. You know, it seemed to be pretty natural for you from our vantage point. But I have to assume there were some struggles with all of that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it was timing that so much of this happened. So made all these genius decisions right around 2006, 2007. There's something like a little housing crisis, mortgage crisis that happened around 2008. So there was a lot of moving parts going on all at once. And a big part of it, I'd had a good income stream coming in for a while, and now I really am on my own. So income is only coming in as we succeed and new at it. So that definitely was a lot of moving pieces. The fitness franchise that we were in was a franchise that had done very well for a long period of time, and then had a massive decline that I probably could have figured out if I had looked at the numbers more. And there's this part too where you always think, okay, that's someone's experience. They're checking out. The fact that the business is declining, that's because they're checking out. They're living out of state. I'm going to do better at it. We're going to bring new energy in. Like you start to tell yourself so many of these things when it was in the numbers. It was easy to see that this is a business that had been declining and probably would have been worth bringing a lot more of that to the table. And so we ended up on that franchise, we ended up closing 2 of our locations and just selling one off. But this is a brand that closed over 8,000 locations in the US over a 3-4 year period. So
Wow.
things that you don't expect going into it.
Right.
Um, and then brand new on the coffee side, get our first location open. And I think what I still appreciate, I was talking about this around our office just even last week, but I still appreciate about the original coffee shop we opened. Having a partner with that helped so much in being able to share the workload, the responsibility, those types of things. And we just opened it, and we never even really thought, like, the amount of marketing, the amount of effort to get to successful, we just didn't think about it. We just kept doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. This is what I'm trying to tell our teams even today. Like, you don't just open a store and see how good it did on day one.
Right.
Right? Day one is, okay, we got our starting point. Now we know how hard we're going to have to work.
Right.
It's this part of, okay, we're going to keep going at it until we get to where we're going.
Yeah.
And we did so much wrong in those first years. Following the systems, I don't think that part felt as hard, because the systems were your lifeline. The systems were, okay, here's, if we're going to market to grow cups, like, what's the system of what marketing should look like, or what type of offer would you use, or who would you market to? Those systems were helpful in so many ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so you ended up so give me the the first moment, and I don't want to define that from, you got into it, you built the store. When, how long did it take before you felt like it was working?
It was probably 2.5 years or so.
Right. Yeah, I know. And that's what I expected. It was a long road. And that's one of the things that I really want and need for people to understand is, yeah, for sure, you hope the first one comes out of the gate hot and is, you can say within 180 days it's working. But there's so many circumstances where that's just not the case, right? And you've gotta stay at it and stay on it. And yeah, I talk about in grind how I've seen so many people in our world that they give up, and I feel like it's just right around the corner. It's right there, and it's coming, and it's coming, and you just gotta continue on, and sometimes it feels like you're beating your head against the wall, but you just gotta continue on. Well, cool. Thank you for sharing all that. Um, Tell me about your business today. And then we can probably, well, there's a ton to fill in the gaps, but like tell me about the business today. Yeah, where are you? What's happening? What's on your mind? Um, Give us the scope of the business, so on.
Yeah. So obviously a lot has happened over time. And it is that as you continue to grow, I think you hit the hurdles over and over and over again. So store 2 doesn't automatically get easier, store 4 doesn't automatically get easier. Like, it's lots of new hurdles. So we're, as an organization, we're sitting here today with 32 locations, approximately 25 million a year in revenue, 600 employees, three active partners. So myself and two other guys that are the active day-to-day. And then we have a few silent partners and everything else at the table as well. It's a much more complicated world than it was 17 years ago.
That's how long it's been, eh?
2006 was when
Yeah.
I left my other job and signed a franchise agreement.
That's amazing. That's amazing. You don't look a day older.
Well, thank you. I did have blonde tips back then, though. So
Remember that. Yeah.
I did decide to walk away from that style with some advice from friends in my life.
You listened.
Right?
He listened. Yeah. Um, let's so you know, the progression, was there a moment in the progression of the business where it felt like it sort of got a momentum of its own, or has it really been, you know, blocking and tackling every day, 17 years? Or, you know, because I don't really know your perception on that. Has there ever been a moment where you felt like it's really starting to get a kind of a momentum behind it, a momentum of its own?
Yeah, that happens in a couple of different ways. I do believe at this moment it has definitely felt like there's been a lot more blocking and tackling than it fully gaining momentum on its own. Now, a lot of that probably comes from the growth we've chosen to try to continue to grow. And we've definitely maintained a growth mindset as an organization. Now, there's parts of it that feel really good. Like we opened a store a month and a half ago, and like I played zero role in that store opening. So watching the teams grow, and even getting to the point of realizing that we have team members today that are way better at handling a customer feedback or an HR issue or an in-depth problem at a store than any of us as owner partners are. Like, that is the stuff that feels really good about it. And there's a lot of moving pieces in continuing to grow because there are so many additional layers to an organization that get built, from needing an accounting department to actually needing a full-time HR to needing district managers and an operations manager that oversees them, and the layers that start to exist, and working really, really hard at how you keep the culture and who you were as an organization in play, because that gets so tested with layers. That gets so tested when your strategic plan, your beliefs of who you are as an organization has to make it from ownership to a leadership team to district managers to a manager to staff. You have to be much more intentional at it to make it work.
So let's dive into the most difficult challenges. And let's divide that out. I mean, from a professional perspective, what has been the most difficult challenge that you faced? But then also, what's been the most difficult personal challenge in relation to the business?
So probably most difficult challenge would be, I still go back, and the last couple of years have definitely been a lot, as everyone talks about. But I go back to when, as an organization, we had about 12 stores, and we decided to bite off buying 4 additional stores. And it's that like true test of how deep are your resources? What do you have? Because when you go in to buy a store, there's also an incredible amount of emotion at play. Especially, I mean, when you buy an individual store, this is an owner operator who put a lot of their own blood, sweat, and tears in. You have people who have worked for someone, they have their way of doing things, their expectations. There's a lot of fear factor that comes into it. And you buy a store hoping to keep the full ecosystem and everything in place, but that definitely doesn't always work. And so when all of a sudden you have 4 stores that need a lot of time, energy, and attention, it puts a lot of strain on the organization. And that was something that probably took us 4 or 5 months to pull through. And it really fully tested who we were.
Yeah, I remember that moment. You know, I don't have the same connection to the pain that you do, but I do remember that moment. Yeah, that was huge. And then okay, so that was the biggest challenge professionally. What's the biggest challenge for you personally in relation to the business?
Yeah, it was making the life adjustments to be able start off with this somewhat naive belief that I'd be able to maintain the same standard of living and everything that we had before. And going through those adjustment periods of downsizing the house that we lived in, downsizing the cars that we drove, downsizing our full standard of living to be able, and this is that mix of personal and business, but I fully remember these moments in the first year. And it was moments of, okay, I have this open. I'm sure it could survive. I could go off. I was the sole breadwinner for our family. We had 2 young kids at home at this point. I could go off and get another job. I could find other ways of making income. But what did I want long term? And making that decision to really invest in this thing, to go all in and make the choices that we would have to make to get through that. And so we moved out of the house that we had custom built, and like I said, sold cars and those types of things, but holding on to a belief that that was going to be short term.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's powerful. You know, and what stuck out to me was going into it with that sort of naive perspective. Do you think that's necessary?
No.
I wonder, like I wonder if, sometimes, when people go into business, whether it's a franchise or not, they go into a business and, you know, most successful entrepreneurs have a story, something like yours, some version of that story. It was harder than I thought it was going to be. The sacrifice was greater than I thought I was going to have to make. And I oftentimes wonder whether people, if they actually knew how hard it was going to be, whether they would do it or not. And so that naive perspective, in some ways, it's almost you almost need it, in order to make the decision. And obviously we do everything we can to prepare people, but
and there's lessons that you can learn from others, and there's lessons that you have to learn on your own. And I believe everyone's answers to that is different.
Yeah.
Which ones you can learn from someone else and which ones you learn on your own. But yeah, like you were saying, I was listening a year ago. the book Delivering Happiness by the Zappos founder. And it's just crazy to me. Here's a guy who had sold a business for such an insane amount of money and was so successful, and then still ended up draining every last penny he had developing Zappos, putting his last piece of real estate on the market, willing to invest that money because he believed in it. And it came through, it worked out for him. But I truly believe that there's those moments where you really have to commit and work through those moments to get to that other side.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who's a serial entrepreneur, and he's continuously been successful in the ventures that he started. He started in the data storage business 25 years ago, and you know, and sold that, and then moved on. And his take has always been, you have to be all in. And you know, I don't know how to do that other than all in, you know, like and I've oftentimes given the advice to prospective franchisees and even current franchisees that if you kind of do it, it will kind of work. And you know, and I see that time and time again. I mean, I look to the letter down throughout time, our successful franchise owners, they were always the people that went all in, you know, and so you confirming that story, and I knew that already, of course, but just, you know, confirming that story again, it's like, yeah, you there's this moment when you got to decide, are you going all in? And you know, and how how instrumental has Annette been in this for you? Because I mean, it sounded like at the beginning, I mean, she was involved in that decision. She was, you know, she agreed. She had to make sacrifices along the way too. You know, what's that been like?
Yeah, so I think my wife has always been there from the support side of things. What's incredible is watching our kids grow up in the business. That is truly a fun thing to watch. They were 6 and 4. I mean, somewhere in that neighborhood, young kids at that moment. I think we both realized that our working styles are going to be different from each other. We're not really going to have offices next to each other or those types of things. And she's definitely come to pursue some of her own passions in life, in business and everything, but always having that full support for BIGGBY, that full support for being self-employed, because that can be really hard on a relationship, for sure. And those are tough decisions that get made, and not having necessarily a guaranteed income stream. So yeah, that's what I would say. Definitely always been supportive and helped out where necessary.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. If you could go back and talk to yourself at 19, what would you tell yourself?
Just strap in for the ride. I don't really think there's things I would change along the way. It all leads to something. Just strap in for the ride and go all in.
Does strap in for the ride mean enjoy the ride?
Yeah. And that's one of those areas I'm really working on trying to learn personally. Enjoy the journey, enjoy the ride. Because it's so easy to look at the 5-year strategic plan and the 10-year strategic plan and the 100 things that need to get fixed. And then it's also easy to have that be I can vacation when I get to this, or I can celebrate when I get to this. And there's always going to be another this.
Yeah, there'll be the 5-year strategic plan at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that I think that's good.
Learn to open the good bottle of wine at the right occasions and celebrate, and because it does all go by quickly at the same time.
Yeah, 17 years has gone by in a flash, and that sounds
Yeah.
crazy, doesn't it?
I have a picture of you somewhere, Mike, at that initial opening.
Yeah, at that point I probably had an apron on, you know. Um, well, I want to spend a little bit of time on the organization you're building. You know, what's working, what are you struggling with? I mean, it's a big company, and you know, there's a lot of people out there that would, you know, it's just an absolute dream to think about opening a store, and then here you are today. So, you know, what is it? What's got your attention right now? What is the, you know, like you mentioned, it's 600 employees. You know, you're developing these leaders within the organization. You have partners, you know, and so on. So where are you now, and what are you focused on, and where are you hoping to get it in the next, you know, 2 to 3 years?
So where I'm focused at the moment is really embracing this idea of strategy, and really embracing this concept of finding where all of our own individual strengths are, and making sure that we're all bringing the right things to the table. And it's this part of, even to get to the point of personal growth, of being able to say that I feel like I'm good at strategy, or I'm strong at strategy, without that feeling proud, or without that feeling that I'm putting someone else down, which none of that makes sense, right? This is why this personal growth stuff is so important too. Um, I've really tried to work with some good business coaches, life mentors, to continue to grow myself through this, so that, because at the end of the day, our individual strengths and what we have to offer are so important. If we're holding those back because of these inner limitations or whatever, then we're hurting our teams and everything too.
Yeah.
So that's part of it, and really working on focusing on this concept of strategy, and realizing how important it is, um, from someone else famous in our life. And I've told him that I've stolen this phrase of his, this concept then of plan the work the plan. And that that's our job as a leadership team in our organization to plan out the work, to plan out what reasonable growth goals are, and methods of execution, and how to get there, and to make sure that we have all of that in a way that's consistent, that can be shared throughout the organization. Because we can't have 32 stores coming up with their own way of how to market, or 32 stores of their own way of what growth goals should look like, or these types of things. We're so much stronger when we're all focused on the same things, doing the same things. And so with that also leads to this weird part of focusing on less things, focusing on, like, maybe we only want 3 strategic goals for the year instead of 30. Maybe we want way less ideas, way less brain farts at the end of the day. Getting really, really consistent. So, you know, if we take that realistic, the last couple of years have been a lot. We go through COVID, mindsets change, much more of a shift to drive through. Profitability becomes harder with rising cost of goods, those types of things. So like in our world right now, we're really focused on how do we build customer counts? How do we build an average beverage check? And how do we really dig into things like our profitability per beverage? And how do we find out where waste is? How do we find out when it's time to raise prices? Those types of things that become really important. And so that's where I spend a lot of my time. And with that comes this realization that if we haven't spent time explaining where we're going, and if we haven't spent time explaining the why behind where we're going, it gets lost so quickly in the organization.
Yeah.
And that message can get communicated in such poor ways. And it's important to check the buy-in at the different levels of the organization and figure out where we're strong and where we have work to grow.
When you think about leading, let's take a store manager. What are the most important things that you can do as you interact, or when you're leading that person? What are the most important things that you can do to help them be successful in that role? I mean, I just heard the piece about you clearly understanding the why behind what we're doing and so on. What are some other things?
Yeah. I think first of all, making sure that we're getting a lot more intentional on the part of making sure that we're hiring based on core value fits, making sure that we have people who are in alignment with the organization as a whole. And then making sure, because this is a lot of what I'm focused on right now, which is why I go to some of these, making sure that we're promoting for the right reasons as well. So the worst thing we can do is go to a barista and be like, you should be a manager because you've been with us longer than anyone else. If they don't have the core competencies to do a manager job, or doing a manager job would actually be more frustrating to them than what they're doing right now, that's not going to be beneficial to them. And then I think it's important to be really super clear in what our expectations are of when we're going to reward and when we're going to have tougher conversations, and then make sure that we have the right tools in place. So if I'm meeting with a manager or whatever who's, let's say, struggling, a lot of times it probably comes down to asking questions to start to understand. Maybe there's a gap in our training. Maybe there's a gap in the way something's explained. Maybe there's a gap in checking in on a 10-year-old process to see if that still works as well today. But we probably don't have someone who's ill-intentioned. We probably don't have someone who's trying to fail. So it's in digging down to figure out where this disconnect is at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I want to leave the opportunity for you to opine on anything else you'd like to, of course. If you could wave a magic wand on BIGGBY today, what things would you change?
Sounds like a dangerous question.
No, I mean, it's
right.
you and I just had this conversation.
Right.
I mean, I'm pretty clear. I know the answers. In fact, I just read your text message again this morning, actually. So, but I think it's important, like when you're growing your organization, you're a leader in our organization as well. We always have to be really clear about some deficiencies or things that we need to be improving, because the minute you think there aren't things to improve, we're in trouble, right? And so I would love for you to just talk about the struggles that you're facing today, and what are the things that you would, if you could, I mean, I've got them too, wave a magic wand and make them all better.
Yeah, I think that in a system where you really follow systems, it you start to realize that even like some of our bad habits and stuff that we pick up, or the things that we realize we could do better today, those come from a greater culture. And so some of the struggles we go through in our organization are the struggles that the brand as a whole goes through at the end of the day. And the I always say that I want to change things. Like I wouldn't want to not have learned a lesson I learned in my life or whatever. I just at the end of the day wish I would have learned them all faster. And that really is this biggest part in so many ways, going from a brand that has 50 stores to 100 stores to 200 to close to 400 today. Those growing pains are huge. And we're on this big march to 1,000 stores. And the biggest part of it, I think, is what we're starting to do as a brand right now, and bringing in the really strong people from other concepts who have been through what we're going through, and have brought it to success. Bringing in strong operations people that have successfully run 100 stores, bringing in strong finance people that have run large organizations or large franchise organizations. The skill sets. The hardest thing that we do in this world, the struggle that we go through in our own world, is promoting from within and not always having the skill sets. This part of having a level 10 mind that makes it really easy to solve a level 2 problem. So I think that's just our number one, is the fastest to getting really strong, skilled people at the table. Not saying we don't have lots of great people already, but people who have been through problems that we're going to be encountering that help shorten that learning curve.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're in that together. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, so is there anything that you want to take a moment talk about that I haven't asked about? I mean, I've kind of just been on a rant of questions here.
All right.
But is there anything else that you'd love to cover?
Yeah, we've covered so much. I think about that part as we start to wrap up. Going into business it's a risk. Risk to me is really, really exciting. Otherwise, life feels like it'd be boring. It's funny, I talk to friends. There's like, I have friends who tell me I'm not the guy who's gonna jump on a set of water skis or go bungee jumping or jump out of a plane. That's not really who I am at the end of the day. And they're like, but you take risk every day with business. But it's fun. It's exciting. It gets the juices flowing. I think people have to figure out if that's in it for them or not. There's people out there who truly just want a solid, steady job, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just like having a strategic mindset isn't better than someone who's really strong at an execution mindset. They're both really, really necessary in our world.
Right. Yeah.
And the main advice that I give when I'm talking to new potential owner operators and everything is this mindset of getting to a spot of being willing to quit your job, go all in, work the shop for a year or two. Don't expect on taking a salary. Be willing to really, really invest. And I really truly believe that the more you're able to invest in those early days, the stronger the payoff is going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. That's well said. I mean, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, Tim, it's an honor. It's an honor to have you. You know, I want to just publicly thank you for the contribution you make. I know it's not always easy to be engaged in the way you are, and you know you make a big sacrifice for the whole group, and you know I cherish it. I'm proud to have you as part of this with us, and you know thank you for taking the time today to come on and share your story and talk about the business. You know I think that this is something that I look at as a valuable asset for people that are interested in getting involved. You know, just that last statement you made right there, right? Like that is, you know, it's a powerful thing for people to hear. So thank you, and I appreciate it, and I look forward to catching up and seeing you soon.
Yeah, thank you. It was my honor as well. This was incredible. So thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care.